Hello everyone, I'm Emma from Art Science Museum. We're very happy to have you with us today for the third session of Let's Talk About. Over the last couple of months, all of our lives have changed in many ways. We can no longer go on holidays, play with our friends, have big gatherings, or even go to school like we were used to. Like many other museums and places around the world, Art Science Museum had to close for a little while to keep you and everyone around safe. But now in phase two, the museum is open, but we will continue to meet you online to remain connected with you. That's why it's really exciting to have all of you here to join us for this session. Let's Talk About is part of the many programs that are available online with Art Science at Home for you to enjoy. Through many exciting workshops, virtual tours, and performances, you can learn how to make your own crafts, tour Art Science Museum, or even watch performances in the comforts of your own homes. If this is your first time joining us today, every episode of Let's Talk About would want to answer the questions that have always been on your minds, but you may be too afraid to ask, or you just can't find any answers for them. For example, have you ever wondered why some of your friends are living with their grandparents and not their parents? Why does your friend only have one parent? And what does it mean when your friend says he or she is adopted? And sometimes you might wonder, what will others think if you talk about why your family is different from theirs? Let's find out more today by talking about how every family is special. Discover how different families can also be alike and why it is important to appreciate and understand the many different families and types of families in our community. Today, we will begin with an introduction, followed by our craft session with special guests, before ending with a Q&A session. Right now, we are live on YouTube and Facebook, so please feel free to pop in questions or thoughts in the chat box below, and they will be answered later on. Now let's hear a bit more from my friend Hazirah, who is part of the Birthday Collective. Over to you, Hazirah.
Thank you, Emma. Hi, everyone. I'm Hazirah, and I'll be talking about how all families are special regardless of what they might look like or who these families consist of. Now, I want you to imagine your family. Who comes to mind? Some of us will think about our parents, our siblings, our cats. Some of us will even think about our grandparents and include our helpers as well. Regardless of whether you call your mother Ma, Mami, Ma, or Ama, your family is special because it's yours. At the same time, who comes to mind for me is different from who comes to mind for you, just like how your family and your best friend's family probably look quite different. That's because every family is different, and that's okay, because every family is special in its own way. Now, what can we expect from today's sharing? Like Emma said, I work with the Birthday Collective, and this series is a collaboration between the Art Science Museum and the Birthday Collective. Part of what we do at the Birthday Collective is to publish 2 books every year. And within these 2 books, as you can see on the slides, are a collection of essays written by people about Singapore and the things that they care about. Now, for this particular presentation, I'll be drawing on essays from the Birthday Book Junior, which is written by young Singaporeans such as yourselves watching this stream, and about the different experiences that they've had growing up in their own very special families. I'll be reading out excerpts or parts of some of their essays, and we'll be joined by some special guests later on. So stay tuned and do look forward to it. Now, does this look familiar? You've probably done something similar in school, or it might be on your kitchen fridge or on your parents' workstations. These are family portraits. Some are drawn by our junior book contributors to represent their families, like this one and this one. Since there are 5 portraits, I'll be talking to you about 5 different types of families. And I'm sure some of you are wondering, what about the black square? Why is there a black square in the middle of the slide? Well, that's for you to fill in later. What does your family look like? Later on, during the craft session, Dina will show you how to make your very own family portrait. So do look forward to that. Now, the very first type of family is what Amelia, our author, calls her multicolored family. Multicolored families, or more commonly known as multiracial or multicultural families, are a family where not everyone is from the same racial or cultural background. As of 2017, about 1 in 5 of all marriages in Singapore are between people of different races. So that means that in 2017, for every 5 couples that got married, one of the couples has the two people from different races. And this is an increase from 1 in 6 in 2007 and 1 in 11 in 1997. So this is quite common. I think most of you have a friend or a classmate who's of mixed race, like our author, Amelia. Amelia is unable to join us, but she has sent in a video of herself reading out her essay for all of us to listen to. Let's have the video and watch Amelia.
Hello everyone, my name is Amelias. Today I'll be telling you about my multicolored family. Multicolored family, you are like a star. Multicolored family, what a rainbow you are. Multicolored family, shining so bright. Multicolored family, let's go for a ride. Multicolored family, let's all be free. Multicolored family, the world's counting on me. Multicolored family, hear the birds tweeting with me. Multicolored family, we'll go out to play. Multicolored family, it's a beautiful day. Thank you.
Aw, thank you, Amelia. Now, the second type of family is families with divorced parents. For this, I'll read out an excerpt from Claire's piece in the junior book, where she shares her feelings about living with her divorced parents, others' perceptions, and how she manages them. People always feel that if your parents are divorced, your life must be messed up, and you live different lives from other kids whose parents are not divorced. Of course, we do have different lives, but I do not think that it's fair to say that all of us are messed up because of it. When people hear my parents are divorced, they usually have big reactions like, "Are you okay?" Or, "You're so open about this. How are you okay with this?" Some friends feel that they need to give me pity, and it's this reaction that makes me feel weird and a bit different. To me, I'm just a regular kid, and I don't know why people make a big fuss out of things. I'm also very fortunate that despite the divorce, my parents get along very well. It makes me happy that my parents do not fight. I think one of the reasons why most kids from divorced families struggle is because their parents continue to fight even after the divorce. The fact is, parents from regular families fight too. What I always try to do in my life is not to dwell on things that I cannot control. I try to think about things to look forward to, or things that make me happy. I think I have a great life even though it's not normal to someone on the outside. Nobody has a perfect life, and we cannot control what happens to us, so let's make the best out of what we have. Thank you, Claire. I think Claire's piece is quite powerful because it reminds us that we shouldn't allow our own perceptions to cloud how we view others before we even get to know them. Claire reminds us that while having divorced parents means that sometimes her daily life is different, she has a good relationship with both her parents who care for her in their own ways, and this does not make her, in her own words, messed up or in need of pity. The third type of family is foster families. I think this might be quite new to most of you, and sometimes what happens with foster families is that your parents are not able to take care of you, so you live with a different set of parents and a different set of siblings until you can stay with your parents again. Fostering is when people who look after you are not related to you by blood. This happens when your parents are unable to care for you, so you stay with someone else for a period of time until your parents or relatives are able to look after you again. The lovely drawing on the left here is done by Lil P, who's 4, and the write-up for this story is done by his foster sister, HJ. I'll read the excerpt. Lil P is a 4-year-old foster child. Having the lack of proper care and love during his early years, Lil P unfortunately has some learning difficulties and entered into foster care after his mother got incarcerated 2 years ago. Lil P is now an active, joyful, and vocal boy. We love him to bits too, and he too loves his family so much. Dear Lil P, we hope that you will live a very fulfilled life, and we hope to be there for you every step of the way on the roads that you will take. Thank you, Lil P, for the drawing and HJ for the accompanying text. We too hope that you and other foster children will be well supported at every step of the roads that you will take. Now, family type number 4. And I think this is quite familiar to most of us, to some of us. Some of us might have aunts who live and work overseas. Some of us have grandparents who live across the border in Malaysia. In fact, some of us have parents who might be working overseas or have to travel a lot because of their job. The accompanying junior book piece for this is by Francesca, who is 16 and living in the Philippines. Her mother works in Singapore as a helper. Now, my mother works in Singapore as a maid. Sometimes you call them foreign domestic helpers. It's difficult to be far away from my mother. When I am back home, and she is in Singapore, I'm sad. It's hard to have my mother be so far away from me for so long, but I understand that this cannot be helped. It is especially hard when I see that my friends get to see their mothers every day. It makes me miss her very much. Luckily, I get to video call her almost every day. She's a single mother, and I really appreciate what she does for me. She's fighting for me even though it's hard. This coming school year, I must study very hard to do well. I hope to run my own business next time and do well enough that I can help my mother. I want to repay her for all the sufferings that she has to go through. I will give her a good life, and hopefully she won't have to walk so far away from me next time. I hope the children in Singapore know how lucky they are to live with their parents. Many of the helpers that work here leave their families behind to come to Singapore. While I know my mother works with a good family, many Filipino helpers here are not as lucky. That makes me sad and angry. Please remember that your helper had to leave behind her family to come take care of yours. I hope you treat your helper well. Thank you, Francesca, for the piece. It's very hard to be physically separated from those you love, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic, which has limited travel for all of us. So people might not be able to see their loved ones as often as they'd like, and others might have their loved ones stuck in another country, which is very, very far away from home. And this is a cause of worry for some, especially those whose loved ones are in cities where there's a higher infection rate or whose healthcare systems might not be as well equipped to handle the pandemic or the outbreak. So we should be kind to each other and check in with your friends more often, especially if you know they have family that's overseas and that's far away. Now, we're on to our fifth and final type of family for the evening. I won't be sharing about this because we have a special guest. Joshua, who wrote the junior book essay for this piece, has joined us on the stream and will read us his essay. Let me hand over the time to Joshua. Joshua, please.
Thank you. My name is Joshua Koo, and I'm 10 years old. My favorite thing to do is cycle. Now let me read my piece. Before I was even born, God had a plan for me. When I was born, I didn't even know my parents. I was adopted. Adopted means I go to another family who choose me and who love me. I did not know the names of my parents when I went to my new family. I was 1 week old. So I came to this new family and became a Christian. Now I know God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. Thank you for reading my essay. Now let me pass the time to Dina.
Thank you so much, Joshua, for that beautiful essay and for sharing with us. Hello, everyone. I'm Dina, and I will be leading the craft activity where we will be doing our very own portrait of our family. How else to better understand other families than to start by knowing our own family first? Like Hazirah shared, every family is different. We will portray that uniqueness in our families in the craft activity. So let's begin. So the materials that you need are simply paper and some color markers. And it's a really easy technique where you start folding your paper. So fold your paper based on the number of family members that you have. So one question to think about is how many members are there in your family? So if you have 2 people in your family, simply fold the paper in half and you can draw it side by side, just like this. If you have a family of 4, basically you fold in half and another half, and you get 4 portions where you can draw them out like that. What if you have a family of 3? So grab a paper, and where the ends are, just roughly fold them this way and then pinch them and press it down, so you'll get 3 portions just like that. What about 6? If you have a family of 6, you simply fold it in another half and you can draw it this way, right? So it's really very simple. And for my family of 8, including cats, so what I've done here is I folded them into half, another half. So just keep folding half and you will get 8, right? And how I've drawn my family by just drawing by using simple shapes like circle for the head. And this is where you think about some of the qualities of your family. What are some of the qualities of your family, right? So have a think. Is it love? Do all of you share things like respect? Do you trust one another? And for my family, most importantly, we believe in strong communication. So we are very open to one another and we communicate a lot, right? So have a think, and then you can include that quality when drawing your family members out. So I'm going to draw my father out. He has big eyes and quite a big smile as well. He has curly hair. So that's my grandfather as well. That's myself, my mother, and my husband. So we will draw them out just like that. Alright, and you can color it in. Go crazy, and when that's done, like what I've done over here, you have your family portrait. Right? So have a lot of fun with it, and just remember to celebrate the love that we feel for our families and all the different varieties that they come in, whether you have two mummies or two dads, a big family or a small family. No matter the size, every family is special in its own unique way. And remember, there are different ways of different ways to be a family. And what's most important is that in a family, there is love, right? So, shall we now take a look at some of the family portraits of some of our friends? Allow me to re-invite Joshua back on stream. And we also have another co-presenter with us, who is Hani. And Hani is actually Hazirah's sister. Hello.
Hello.
So Joshua, maybe you want to share your masterpiece first with us, and then Hani can go next. So Joshua,
Okay.
please share what you've done.
Hi everyone, this is my family. So you got my mother, my sister, and me. So you got Mochi, our Shiba Inu, she's the first dog. And Milky, our Pomeranian, which is the second dog. And Muesli, which is the Corgi, and she's the third dog. Thank you for looking at my family.
Thank you for sharing. Hani, would you like to go next, please?
Okay. Yes, I need to hold. Okay. I'll hold.
Hi, my name is Tanya. I come from a family of 7. I have 4 older siblings. My sister.
Point.
I can't see.
My sister.
My sister.
Okay.
My 3 brothers and me.
Oh, that's really nice.
Do you have anything else to say?
No.
No?
No.
No. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua and Hani, for sharing your self-portrait. Let's show everybody. Show your self-portraits to everyone. Thank you. Have you got Joshua back? Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank
Okay.
you, children. We also have a special shout out to Dania Rao, who has contributed her lovely artwork of her multi-colorful family, as shared by Amelia earlier. That term I love. Multicolored family. So Dania Rao, thank you so much for contributing your lovely artwork for this session. Thank you once again, Dania. And thank you for joining us and for this craft activity. Don't forget to share your masterpieces with us at the hashtag ASM Let's Talk About. And thank you for joining the craft activity. I now hand the time back to Emma. Over to you, Emma.
Thank you, Dina, Joshua, Hani, and Dania for sharing your heartwarming thoughts and portraits of your family members with us. Indeed, a family is made up of people who love and care for one another. Even if families may look different, every family is special in their own ways. And very importantly, love is what makes a family. Now I'd like to invite Hazirah back for the Q&A session.
Thank you, Emma.
Hello, Hazirah. So there are a couple of comments inside the chat box, but I'd like to begin with some thoughts on the word family. So today's sharing has shown us the meaning of family is not one of blood, but of respect, trust, joy, and love in one another's life. And that every family has a special story to tell. So in the current society, how would you explain or define what a family is?
Okay. I think for this, it depends, right? Because I think for every person, like I said earlier in the presentation, who you consider as your family is very different from who, like, your best friend or your cousin might consider as their family, because I think what we tend to think of first is who is related to you. So like, who are your siblings, who are your parents, but it's not just that, because it's also the relationship that you have with each person. That's not just the blood that connects you, but also the kind of love and care that you have for each other. Because Emma, you mentioned certain values, right? Like respect, love, and joy. And I think that's actually a slightly better indication of who you consider, of how you can figure out like who is in your family or who makes up that family for you. Because I think another type of family that I didn't present about is like abusive families, or families where, you know, the what you grew up with might not necessarily be the best situation. And I think for some people who are in those situations, when they get older, they find families of their own. So that's the other possibility. And in that case, then the what ties the family together is really a love of like love and affection and care for each other, more so than what blood relations you might have.
Yeah, you're right about that. Like how the being very affectionate and communication as well is very crucial in family as well. So one of the things that's on my mind is that what are some of the guidance or like feelings or acceptance can you suggest to people who are from like different circumstances, like how they should not feel awkward about it and things like that?
Okay, I think how do I start this? I think for me, I can't I can't sympathize with that situation, because I think I grew up in a very, very like loving family with very loving parents and with siblings that, even though like I fight with, a lot with, we get along very well, very well. But I think for people who might be struggling with the feelings of acceptance, what I find helps when you struggle with these situations is to just think to yourself, like, if, how do I say this? Like, to think about how the people are still, like, the people around you are still showing care to you. Because I think that's something that I've reflected on, right? Like, growing up, there are a lot of times when my parents did things that I didn't agree with, or that I felt was not fair. And I think when you're young, it's very common to feel that way. But it's helpful to think from the other person's perspective. Like, why is the other person asking you to do certain things? Like, why do your parents insist that you come back by 11, regardless of where you are, even if you're at your grandparents' house, that kind of thing? It's because from their perspective, they're like, oh, I want to make sure that you are safe and you are okay. And I think if you understand where their perspective is coming from, usually it comes from a place of care. And usually as you get older, these are things that you can learn to like reconcile. Because if you might not have agreed on this growing up, if you know that the reason why they did it is because they care for you and you feel that it's helped you become a better person, then, or they have raised you with the correct values, then it's a valuable, then how do I say this? Then I think it's easier for you to overcome that initial feeling of frustration or anger towards like whatever situations you're in. At the same time, I think this obviously doesn't translate for everyone. I think there are people who are in situations where they might not understand and not agree with it, and even after talking to, like, I don't know, their parents or their siblings, they still disagree. I think at which point it's important for you to figure out who cares for you and who is trying to help you in a way that you can also understand and communicate. So I think like what I'm trying to say about this is to like learn how to communicate, especially I think when you get older, because you will like, you have a different perspective from your parents. I think that's quite normal. So you just have to remember to communicate with them to make sure that you're not, how do I say this, that you are still, that you remain on good terms even after like you are independent or a bit older.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think now as we grow older and everything, we understood like why our parents would disagree with the things that we do when we were much younger. And now you're probably doing the same for your younger sister as well. And she probably has to see from here and see from another perspective that, at the end of the day, we do not let them not do things just because we don't want them to do it, but really it's for their safety and we really care for them. So how about for rest of the people, like rest of the other people in the community, like how would you advise us, or like maybe the rest of the people, like how to practice empathy when they meet people from different backgrounds and how to be more sensitive to it?
I think, okay, what I personally find helpful and I think this might seem a bit like counterintuitive for some people, is that when you approach someone from a different background, you don't how do I say this? Like, the point is not to empathize with what they're saying, but rather to listen to what they're saying. Because I think when people tell us like their perspective on certain things, right, I think a lot of times we tend to get swept up in that emotion and the thing is, the reason why you get swept up in emotion is usually because there's something that you relate to in that. And then I think what I find happens a lot is that your experience of, how do I say this, like the emotion that you have is related to an experience, and the experience that you have is overriding your understanding of the other person's perspective. So for example, if the other person is telling you about how, like, oh, they find it very difficult to talk to their parents, right? And then your immediate response is like, yeah, you know, I also find it very hard to talk to my parents because my parents are then you are not empathizing with the person. You're not understanding what the other person is trying to tell you, because what you're doing is you're trying to like impose your own feelings or understanding of the situation. So what I find helpful is to stop and be aware of how do I say this, like your position. So you be aware of like the feelings that you might have or your views, and then you hold them and you listen to the other person talk first. So I think once you get a better understanding of that, then you figure out like where you what your common areas are and what the areas that are different before like you obtain a better understanding. Yeah, because I think I said this, yeah, if like I came to this conclusion a few years back that sometimes in conversations, I think a lot of people tend to listen to respond. So when someone says something, you just like, oh, okay, you pick on like, you know, in the 10 minutes of their speech, you pick on points 1, 2, and 3 because you want to like engage them on points 1, 2, and 3. And there's nothing wrong with that because there's a place for that kind of engagement. But if you want to understand where the other person is coming from, or if you want to like, I guess, develop a sense of empathy for the person's situation, right? Then what you need to do is to stop, understand the whole thing before you like engage with it. Yeah, so you really should seek to listen, not to respond when other people are trying to tell you about their experiences.
I think it's a very good advice to listen first before you can gather all your emotions and then respond with empathy and everything. So actually with that, right, something that's always on my mind is also like how we can, you know, with children now, how do we actually get them to understand that, you know, not all families are really the same, and like how, you know, they like what one of the people you mentioned earlier, that, you know, people have this judgment of like children from divorced family and everything. Like how do we actually get our children to realize that, you know, it's fine, like everyone, you know, we are all just regular kids in school together and things like that.
I think off the top of my head, what would help would be to start with what's familiar. So I think, like I mentioned during the presentation, you know, most of us probably have, like most of the kids have classmates who are from multiracial or multicultural families. And I do think that now, because like there's greater awareness, right, you know of a family that's different from yours. So and I'm talking about real life families, but also in terms of like cartoons, right? So the Disney cartoon Phineas and Ferb has a blended family where there's a like Candace and Phineas, so a pair of siblings are from like the mother, and then the mother marries the father, and then they have Ferb, like their stepbrother. So I think this is one way for you to one way for parents to start conversations, right? So if you don't know how to talk to your kids, then you start from what's familiar, like cartoons. You can talk about Cinderella and her stepsisters, but I think that's probably like a bit of a negative example for like different families that might not get along as well. But you start with something that's familiar, and then from there I think it depends also on how, like what your child's initial response is. Because I think if the child comes back and then they're like, oh, I have a classmate whose parents are divorced, and then my classmate say this about this, right? Then in which case, that's probably what you want to like deal with, right? Like deal with the, why do you think your classmate said this, or where is it coming from? But if your child just comes, if you just want to introduce the differences, then I think it makes sense to like explain it first before you start with the like perceptions that people have of those things.
Yeah. And with children, actually, they always start with no perception. Is a community that forms the perception, right?
Yeah.
So we have a question from the ground from Sin. She was wondering if you are able to share how the collective works with Amelia, Claire, and all the little superstars to tell their stories.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Sin, for the question. The Birthday Collective does actually a bunch of different projects. So the collaboration is one, but it started off initially as a way for people to tell stories that they have, like different perspectives from what we commonly hear, like in the media or in Singapore. So because of that, it's a collection of like short stories and essays. So specific to the Birthday Book Junior, the idea was pitched that we want to hear young children tell their stories and like the different experiences that they have, because I think like there's this misconception maybe that their thoughts might not be as developed, or you might not think that young children have many things to say, but they do. So how it works is that they how it works is that I think people reach out. So people on the team do reach out to different people that they know, and ask them to contribute stories to this. So some of the essays are written by people who are related to us, or like who are our acquaintances, but some are there because we've reached out to them and asked them to tell their stories. So there's a theme every year, and I think the theme for last year was the roads that we had to take, I think something like that. So given that theme, I think the team thinks about like, oh, who can we reach out to with that, and then they work directly with the children to write the story. So the kids will write the stories. There's an editing process. They submit the pictures. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's a very interesting process also. So I'm very conscious of the time now, and like usually we'll end with this session to conclude our session. This question, I mean. So in your experience, what are some of your recommendations to follow up with the conversation after this session to help children better understand diverse families, which is something adding on to what we talked about earlier as well?
I think definitely start with what's familiar. So like I mentioned, if if the children have classmates who come from the like one of the 5 families that was presented, then you can like talk to them about that. By that I mean, like bring it up and then ask, especially if that the child is close to their classmate, and be like, does your classmate celebrate both Hari Raya and Chinese New Year? Do they struggle with communicating maybe with their grandparents if their grandparents don't speak like any of the languages that they learn in school? So I think start with like the tangible of it. For some family types, like foster families, there are quite a few resources available online, because Singapore is actually looking for for foster parents to adopt children, to take children in. So there are quite a few like podcasts, and then MSF and some of the other social service like bodies have quite a few resources. So you can use that and use it to talk to the children about it, also because the resources are very accessible for that. Yeah, but I think it's really, as with most things, I always recommend starting with what's familiar first, and then once you establish like what the child's understanding is, then you can introduce like more ideas or new things.
Thank you so much. I didn't know about the resources, but I'll probably check them out after today's session as well. So with that, I'd like to conclude our session today. So thank you, Hazirah, for sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you, Dina, Josh, and Hani, for joining us, and everyone who joined us today. This is one of the many programs we are presenting for Art Science at Home, with many more lined up in the coming months. Please stay tuned to our website, Facebook, and Instagram for more information. We have now come to the end of our session. Stay safe, everyone, and see you next time. Bye.
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 See you.
Okay. Thank you, Small.